The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal towers of Nexus Prime, the shining capital of the Zephyrian Empire. Ambassador Crixvel walked through the gleaming corridors of the High Council building, his footsteps echoing against the smooth walls. In his scaled hands he carried the monthly report on the Outer Rim territories, a thick bundle of data tablets that contained information about hundreds of primitive worlds. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. Their advanced technology and superior military might have crushed any species that dared to resist their expansion. Worlds fell before their crystal ships like wheat before the scythe, and entire civilizations bent the knee to their emperors. But today something was different. As Crixvel entered the vast chamber where the High Council met, he noticed the unusual tension in the air. The 12 members of the council sat in their towering seats, their blue-scaled faces showing concern rather than their usual arrogant confidence. "Report, Ambassador," commanded High Counselor Vextool, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "What news from the outer territories?" Crixvel activated his data tablet and began his routine presentation. The conquest of the Rigel. System proceeds as planned. The local population offers minimal resistance. The mining operations on Kepler 442b have exceeded projected yields by 15%. The slave labor camps on Proxima Centauri are operating at full capacity. As he spoke, images of conquered worlds appeared on the chamber's holographic displays. Burning cities, fleeing populations, and the familiar sight of Zephyrian flags rising over the ruins of alien civilizations. It was a scene that had played out countless times across the galaxy. "And what of the red flag system?" asked Elder Tanox, the oldest member of the council. His ancient voice carried a note of worry that made the other counselors shift uncomfortably. In their seats, Crixvel's expression darkened. "Sulfuri remains unchanged. The humans continue their primitive existence, unaware of our presence. They have achieved basic faster-than-light travel, but their technology is thousands of years behind ours." Elder Tanox leaned forward in his chair, his weathered features creased with concern. "The warnings remain in effect?" "Yes, Elder. The ancient precursor records are clear. This species is not to be disturbed under any circumstances. They are to remain isolated in their home system." A younger counselor, Vexka, laughed dismissively. "Elder Tanox, with respect, those warnings are over 10,000 years old? The precursors have been extinct for millennia. Why should we fear the primitive creatures of a single backward world?" "Because," Tanox replied slowly, "the precursors were wise beyond our understanding. They left those warnings for a reason." But Vexka was not alone in his skepticism. Several other young counselors nodded in agreement. "Look at the data," Vexka continued, gesturing to the holographic display. "The humans have barely explored their own star system. They fight among themselves constantly. Their weapons are crude projectile and chemical-based systems. What possible threat could they pose to our empire?" Commander Zexmore, the military representative on the council, stepped forward. "If I may, High Counselor," he said, his voice confident and strong. "My scouts have observed the human homeworld extensively. They are divided into numerous competing factions. Their military forces are small and poorly equipped. A single battle cruiser could reduce their entire civilization to ash." The discussion continued for over an hour, with the younger counselors growing more insistent that the ancient warnings were meaningless. They pointed to the Empire's recent victories, their technological superiority, and the vast resources at their disposal. What could one primitive world possibly do against the might of 3,000 years of galactic conquest? Finally, High Counselor Vextool raised his hand for silence. "The decision is made. We will contact this human species and offer them the same choice we have given all others. Submit to imperial rule or face extinction." Elder Tanox rose from his seat, his ancient form trembling with emotion. "This is madness. The precursors specifically warned against provoking these creatures. They called humans the sleeping giant, the ones who must never be awakened. The precursors are dead, Vextool replied coldly. Their warnings died with them. We are the masters of this galaxy now. Meanwhile, on the third planet of the Sol System, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his office at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Colorado Springs. The morning briefing had been routine reports from the outer colonies, updates on the new faster-than-light drives, and plans for the next wave of exploration missions. Jake was a career military officer, 42 years old with graying hair, and the weathered face of someone who had seen combat. He had served in the Outer Colony Wars, fighting against pirates and separatist groups in the asteroid belt. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what was about to happen. His communication device beeped, indicating an incoming priority message. Jake activated the holographic display and found himself looking at Dr. Lisa Shang, Earth's leading expert on xenobiology and alien languages. Jake, we have a problem, Lisa said, her usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious concern. We've received a transmission from outside the solar system. It's definitely alien in origin. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. First contact with an alien species had been theoretical for decades, but most scientists believed it was still years away. What kind of transmission? Come to the lab immediately. You need to see this. 20 minutes later, Jake stood in Dr. Chang's laboratory, watching as she played back the alien transmission. The message was unlike anything he had ever heard, a complex series of tones and frequencies that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly intelligence. Can you translate it? Jake asked it. Lisa nodded grimly. I've been working on it for the past 6 hours. The language is incredibly sophisticated, but I think I've got the basic meaning. She paused, as if reluctant to continue. It's an ultimatum, Jake. They're demanding that we surrender all of Earth's resources and submit to their rule. We have 7 days to comply. Jake stared at the translation displayed on the screen. The message was cold and impersonal, written with the casual arrogance of a species that had never been challenged. It spoke of the Zephyrian Empire, of their vast fleets and conquered worlds, of the futility of resistance. What happens if we refuse? Jake asked. They'll destroy us, Lisa replied simply. Complete annihilation of our species. Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Humanity had always wondered about their place in the universe, about whether they were alone among the stars. Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. I need to contact President Hayes immediately, Jake said. This is beyond anything the military can handle alone. Within hours, the emergency session of the United Earth Council was underway. President Hayes, a stern woman in her 50s who had led humanity through the difficult years of planetary unification, listened to the briefing with growing alarm. So our choices are slavery or extinction? She asked. Dr. Chang nodded. Based on the transmission, yes. The Zephyrian Empire has apparently conquered thousands of worlds. They see us as just another primitive species to be absorbed into their empire. What do we know about their military capabilities? General Marcus Webb, the head of Earth's military forces, consulted his datapad. Unknown, but presumably vast. Any species capable of interstellar conquest would have to possess technology far beyond our current capabilities. President Hayes was silent for several minutes, weighing the impossible choice before her. Finally she spoke. Prepare a response. Tell them that humanity declines their offer. The room erupted in shocked voices. Several council members protested, arguing that resistance was suicide. But President Hayes held up her hand for silence. We didn't fight our way up from the caves to bow down to alien tyrants, she said firmly. If they want our world, they'll have to take it. The response was transmitted that same day, a simple message that would change the course of galactic history. The people of Earth reject your ultimatum. We will defend our world and our freedom. On Nexus Prime, the Zephyrian High Council received the human response with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. These primitive creatures actually thought they could resist the might of the Empire. So be it, High Counselor Vextool declared. Prepare the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. We will teach these humans the price of defying the Zephyrian Empire. As the Council dispersed to begin preparations for war, Elder Tanox remained in his seat, staring at the holographic display that showed the small blue world in the distant Sol system. He could feel the weight of history pressing down upon him, the terrible certainty that they had just made a mistake that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. What have we done? He whispered to himself. What have we awakened? The Zephyrian Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a storm of crystal and metal. 200 warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of Earth's sun. Each vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, sleek and deadly, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been broken. Fleet. Admiral Zexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion, watching as his tactical displays lit up with data about the primitive human star system. His scaled features showed nothing but contempt as he observed the crude human installations scattered throughout the system. Asteroid mining stations, orbital platforms, and a handful of military outposts that looked like children's toys compared to his mighty fleet. Status report, Zexmore commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge. All ships report ready for combat, Admiral, replied his tactical officer. The human defensive positions are exactly as our scouts predicted. 3 orbital defense platforms around their homeworld, approximately 50 small patrol vessels, and what appears to be their main fleet gathered near the 4th planet. Zexmore laughed, a harsh sound that made his bridge crew straighten with pride. 50 ships? Is that all? We have faced mining colonies with better defenses. But the Admiral's confidence was about to be tested. As the Zephyrian fleet moved deeper into the system, they encountered their first surprise. The human ships were not retreating or cowering in fear as expected. Instead, they were moving to intercept, forming a defensive line between the alien fleet and Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of the human flagship Defiance, watching the alien vessels approach on her tactical display. She was a veteran of 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, a woman who had earned her position through skill and determination rather than politics. Her brown hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had faced death before and survived. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan, she spoke into her communication device. Remember, we are not just fighting for Earth, we are fighting for the future of humanity. Every second we delay them is another second for our people to prepare. The human fleet consisted of 93 vessels of various sizes. Most were converted cargo ships and patrol boats, hastily armed with the best weapons Earth could produce. Only 12 were true warships, built specifically for combat against the Zephyrian Armada. They looked hopelessly outmatched. Captain Don Rodriguez piloted his fighter, the Wasp, through the formation of human ships. He was 28 years old, a hotshot pilot who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions during the colony wars. His fighter was small and fast, armed with plasma cannons and a handful of missiles. This is Wasp leader to all fighters, Don spoke into his radio. Stay close to the capital ships. Use their cover and watch each other's backs. We might be outnumbered, but we know how to fight. The first shots were fired when the two fleets were still 1,000,000 kilometers apart. The Zephyrian vessels opened up with their reality disruption weapons, beams of energy that could bend space itself. The attacks were precise and devastating, designed to cripple the human ships before they could respond, but the humans had learned something during their years of warfare among themselves. They had learned to adapt, to survive, and to fight with everything they had. As the alien weapons struck their shields, the human ships scattered in all directions, abandoning their neat formation for the chaos of real combat. All units, break formation and engage at will, Admiral Sullivan ordered. Use speed and maneuverability. Don't let them get a clear shot. The human ships moved like a swarm of angry insects, darting between the massive Zephyrian vessels and striking at weak points. Their weapons were crude compared to the alien technology, but they were effective. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds hammered against crystal hulls, finding gaps in the enemy shields. Captain Rodriguez dove his fighter between two Zephyrian cruisers, his cannons blazing. The alien ships were huge, each one 10 times the size of his fighter, but they were also slow to turn. He raked his weapons across the hull of one vessel, watching sparks fly as his plasma bolts found their mark. "Got you," he whispered, pulling his fighter into a tight turn to avoid the return fire, but the Zephyrians were not helpless. Their ships began to adapt to the human tactics, using their superior firepower to create killing zones that the smaller human vessels could not penetrate. One by one, human ships began to fall. The destroyer Courage took a direct hit from a Zephyrian battlecruiser, its hull splitting open like a flower. The crew of 200 died instantly, their sacrifice adding to the growing cost of the battle. "We're losing too many ships," reported Commander Sarah Blake from the bridge of the cruiser Determination. She was young for her rank, only 25, but she had proven herself in the asteroid belt campaigns. "We need to change tactics." Admiral Sullivan watched her tactical display with growing concern. The human fleet was being torn apart by the superior alien technology. But she also noticed something else. The Zephyrians were fighting like they expected an easy victory. They were not prepared for the desperate fury of humans who had nothing left to lose. "All ships, new orders," Sullivan announced. "Target there. Command vessels, ramming speed if necessary. We make them pay for every meter of space." The order changed everything. Instead of trying to outfight the superior alien technology, the humans began to fight like cornered animals. Ships with failing engines turned toward the enemy, their crews determined to take as many aliens with them as possible. The frigate Liberty, her hull breached and life support failing, rammed into the side of a Zephyrian destroyer. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, taking both vessels with it. The crew of 150 humans died, but they took 300 aliens with them. Admiral Zexmore watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. His fleet was winning, but the cost was far higher than anyone had predicted. The humans were not fighting like any species the Empire had ever encountered. They were fighting with a berserker rage that ignored all tactical sense. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we have lost 47 ships. This is unacceptable casualties for a primitive species." "Continue the attack," Zexmore ordered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "We must crush them quickly before they can inflict more damage." Captain Rodriguez found himself in the middle of the heaviest fighting, his fighter dancing between the massive alien vessels. His plasma cannons were nearly empty and his shields were failing. But he was not finished yet. He spotted a Zephyrian command ship, larger than the others and bristling with communication arrays. It was the perfect target. Rodriguez turned his fighter toward the alien vessel, pushing his engines to maximum power. "This is Aswasp Leader," he spoke into his radio. "My ship is damaged and I'm not going to make it back. But I'm going to make this count." His fighter streaked toward the Zephyrian command ship, dodging defensive fire and smaller escort vessels. The alien point defense systems opened up, filling space with deadly energy beams. Rodriguez's fighter took hit after hit, its hull glowing white-hot from the damage, but he kept going. The fighter slammed into the command ship's bridge at nearly the speed of light, its small fusion reactor detonating in a brilliant flash. The explosion tore through the alien vessel's hull, killing hundreds of crew members and crippling the ship's ability to coordinate the fleet. "Admiral," Sullivan watched the sacrifice with tears in her eyes. "All units, press the attack, make their sacrifice count." The battle raged for 6 more hours. When it finally ended, the space around Earth was filled with the debris of both fleets. The human defenders had lost 78 ships and over 15,000 crew members. It was a devastating blow to Earth's small military, but the Zephyrians had lost something far more valuable. 120 ships of their proud Third Fleet were now floating wreckage. More importantly, they had lost their sense of invincibility. The primitive humans had hurt them badly. Admiral Zexmore stood in his damaged command center, staring at the tactical display that showed the scattered remains of his fleet. His scaled features were pale with shock and fear. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever inflicted such casualties on a Zephyrian fleet. "Withdraw to the outer system," he ordered quietly. "Send a message to High Command. Tell them we need reinforcements." As the surviving alien ships limped away from Earth, Admiral Sullivan allowed herself a moment of relief. They had won the first battle, but she knew it was only the beginning. The aliens would be back, and next time they would be ready for human tactics. "Status report," she called to her bridge crew. "Earth's orbital defenses are intact," reported her tactical officer, "but we've lost most of our fleet. We have maybe 15 ships left in fighting condition." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Then we better make them count. Signal all colonies to begin evacuation procedures." This war is just getting started. On the planet below, President Hayes watched the battle through the orbital telescopes. The human victory had come at a terrible cost, but it had also proven something important. Humanity could fight. They could bleed the aliens. And if they could bleed, they could be beaten. Prepare the emergency war measures. The news of the Third Fleet's defeat reached Nexus Prime like a thunderclap across the galaxy. High Counselor Vextool stood in the emergency session chamber, his blue-scaled features twisted with rage and disbelief, the holographic reports floating. Before him showed the impossible truth: over half of their fleet, destroyed by a primitive species that should have been crushed in minutes. "How is this possible?" Vextool demanded, his voice echoing through the crystal halls. "Admiral Zexmore commanded our finest ships, our most advanced weapons. These humans should have surrendered the moment they saw our fleet." Commander Crixvel, who had barely escaped the battle in a damaged cruiser, stood before the council with his head bowed. "High Counselor, the humans fought unlike any species we have encountered. They showed no fear of death. When their ships were damaged, they used them as weapons, ramming our vessels with suicidal attacks." "Suicide attacks?" Elder Tanox spoke from his seat, his ancient voice carrying a note of terrible understanding. "The precursors warned of this. They called humans the sleeping giant, the species that becomes more dangerous when threatened. But the younger council members were not interested in ancient warnings. They saw only humiliation and the need for revenge." "We must mobilize the entire fleet," declared Counselor Vexka. "Every ship, every weapon. We will turn their homeworld into dust." "Yes," agreed Vextool. "Send word to all sectors. The 2nd, 4th, and 7th fleets will converge on the human system. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy." The Empire. While the Zephyrian Empire prepared for total war, something remarkable was happening among the humans. The species that had spent centuries fighting among themselves suddenly found a common purpose. The victory over the Third Fleet had awakened something deep in the human spirit, something that had been sleeping since their ancestors first picked up tools and decided to fight back against the hostile universe. Colonel Ryan Murphy stood in the briefing room of the newly constructed Earth Defense Headquarters, looking at the faces of his officers. Murphy was a career soldier, 45 years old, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. But now those eyes burned with a new kind of fire. "The enemy will be back," he told his staff. "Our intelligence suggests they are gathering a much larger force. We cannot wait for them to come to us again." Lieutenant Amy Foster, a young intelligence officer fresh from the academy, raised her hand. "Sir, what are you suggesting?" "We take the fight to them," Murphy replied. "We follow their retreating ships back to their territory. We find out what we are really dealing with." The idea was considered insane by many. Earth's remaining fleet consisted of only 15 combat-ready ships, hardly enough to defend their own system, let alone launch an attack into alien space. But President Hayes approved the mission, understanding that humanity needed to know what they were truly facing. The human expedition launched 2 weeks after the first battle. Colonel Murphy commanded the mission from the bridge of the rebuilt Destroyer Vengeance, leading a small fleet of scouts and fighters into the unknown. They followed the energy signatures left by the retreating Zephyrian ships, jumping from system to system deeper into alien territory. What they found horrified them. The first system they entered contained 3 inhabited worlds. From orbit, they looked beautiful, green planets with blue oceans and white clouds. But as the human sensors gathered data, the terrible truth became clear. The worlds were covered with massive slave camps. Billions of beings lived in conditions worse than anything humans had imagined. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Foster as she read the sensor reports. "These are concentration camps." Entire continents turned into prison factories. Captain Tony Garcia, commanding the scout ship Ranger, transmitted additional data from his reconnaissance flight. "Sir, I'm detecting artificial famines on the second planet. They are deliberately starving the population to maintain control." Murphy felt his jaw tighten with anger. "Continue scanning. I want to know everything about their operation." As they moved deeper into Zephyrian space, the horrors multiplied. World after world showed the same pattern: enslaved populations, strip-mined resources, and the complete destruction of native cultures. The Zephyrian Empire had turned conquest into a system of industrial-scale genocide, but the humans also discovered something else. They were not alone in their hatred of the Empire. Hidden resistance movements existed on dozens of worlds, desperate beings who had been waiting for someone to strike back against their oppressors. On the fourth world they surveyed, Murphy made contact with a resistance cell of the Cathar, a reptilian species that had been enslaved for over 2 centuries. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Vostak, appeared on the human communication screen with tears in his large eyes. "You are the ones who hurt the crystal ships?" Vostak asked in broken but understandable English. "You are the ones who made them bleed?" "We are," Murphy replied. "And we are going to make them bleed a lot more." The meeting changed everything. Murphy realized that humanity was not just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for the freedom of an entire galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear for so long that most species had forgotten what it meant to resist. But the humans remembered. It was written in their DNA, carved into their souls by millions of years of evolution on a world that had tried to kill them at every turn. They were survivors, fighters, and most importantly, they were too stubborn to give up. Murphy sent a coded message back to Earth. "We are not just defending our world anymore. We are liberating the galaxy." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Lisa Shang was making discoveries that would change humanity's understanding of their own history. Working with captured Zephyrian technology and databases, she had been translating ancient records that the aliens had collected from across the galaxy. Deep in her laboratory, surrounded by alien artifacts and computer displays, Lisa stared at a translation that made her blood run cold. The file was marked with precursor symbols, the mysterious race that had vanished from the galaxy 50,000 years ago. "Project Genesis," she read aloud. "Final phase of the Guardian Protocol." The document described an experiment that had lasted millions of years. The precursors had seeded a remote world with a species designed to be the ultimate soldiers, beings who would grow stronger under pressure, who would never surrender, and who would fight with increasing fury when threatened. "They created us," Lisa whispered, her hands shaking as she read further. "The precursors made humanity to be their weapon against species like the Zephyrians." The genetic analysis was clear. Human DNA contained modifications that were impossible to achieve naturally. Enhanced aggression response, increased adaptability, and most importantly, a psychological profile that made them more dangerous the more desperate they became. Lisa immediately called President Hayes with her discovery. "Madam President, we need to talk. I have found something that explains everything." The emergency meeting was held in the highest security bunker beneath the White House. President Hayes listened to Dr. Chang's report with growing amazement and horror. "So we are not just another species," Hayes said slowly. "We are a weapon. A weapon created by an ancient race to fight galactic tyrants." "That explains the precursor warnings," Lisa replied. "They knew what would happen if humanity was threatened. They designed us to be the galaxy's immune system, activated only when needed." The revelation spread through the human government and military like wildfire. Some people were horrified to learn that their entire species was an artificial creation. Others felt a sense of destiny, understanding that they had been born for this moment. Colonel Murphy received the news while his fleet was hiding in an asteroid field near a Zephyrian supply depot. The information changed his entire perspective on the war. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fulfilling their purpose as a species. "Attention all ships," Murphy announced over the fleet communication system. "We have just received intelligence that changes everything. We are not victims in this war, we are the solution." The human fleet moved against the Zephyrian supply depot with new purpose. The attack was swift and brutal, with human ships appearing from the asteroid field like deadly ghosts. The alien defenders, expecting another routine patrol, were caught. Completely off guard, Captain Garcia led his fighters in a devastating assault on the depot's defensive systems. "This is for every world you have enslaved," he said as his plasma cannons tore through the enemy shields. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. When it was over, the supply depot was a floating ruin, and the human fleet had captured enough enemy supplies to support their operations for months. More importantly, they had rescued over 3,000 prisoners from a dozen different species. Among the rescued prisoners was Dr. Zenkaller, a brilliant scientist from the Vashani species who had been forced to work on Zephyrian weapons. When he learned about the human victory, he fell to his knees and wept. "For 200 years, my people have prayed for someone to free us," he said. "The ancient stories spoke of warriors who would come from the stars to break our chains. You are those warriors." Murphy helped the alien scientist to his feet. "We are not warriors," he said. "We are humans. And we are going to end this empire once and for all." The greatest fleet in galactic history moved through space like a dark storm cloud. 3,000 Zephyrian warships, representing the combined might of the 2nd, 4th, and 7th fleets, advanced toward the Sol system with deadly purpose. Admiral Kextor, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Navy, stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, watching the tactical displays that showed his armada's progress. "This ends today," Kextor declared to his assembled officers. "These humans have humiliated our empire for the last time. When we are finished, their world will be nothing but radioactive dust." The admiral was confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming power. Each of his ships was a masterpiece of destruction, armed with weapons that could shatter moons and shields that had never been penetrated. The combined firepower of his fleet could reduce entire star systems to ash dot, but as the Zephyrian armada approached Earth, they found something unexpected waiting for them. The humans had not been idle during the months since the first battle. They had been preparing, building, and most importantly, learning from every piece of captured alien technology. General Marcus Webb stood in the command center of Fortress Station, humanity's new deep space stronghold built in the asteroid belt. The massive structure bristled with weapons and sensors, a floating castle designed to coordinate Earth's defense. Webb was a veteran of 40 years of military service, a man who had seen humanity's darkest hours and refused to give up hope. Status. "Report," Webb called to his staff as the alien fleet appeared on the long-range sensors. 3,000 ships confirmed, reported Major Helen Clark, his intelligence officer. "Admiral, this is 10 times larger than anything we have faced before." Webb nodded grimly. "Then we better make sure we are ready for them. Signal all units to take positions. Operation Hornet's Nest is now active." The humans had learned valuable lessons from their first encounter with the Zephyrians. They could not match the aliens in raw firepower or technology, but they had advantages that the Empire had never faced before. They were fighting for their home, they were unpredictable, and most importantly, they refused to follow the rules of conventional warfare. Captain Nicole Barnes commanded a squadron of 30 fast attack ships hidden among the asteroids near Jupiter. Her vessels were small and stealthy, built for hit-and-run attacks rather than direct combat. Barnes herself was a former smuggler who had joined the military when the war began, bringing with her the skills of someone who had spent years avoiding authority. "Remember the plan?" she told her pilots over the secure communication channel. "We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we disappear before they can respond." Ghost tactics, just like we practiced. The first phase of the battle began when the Zephyrian fleet was still 2 days away from Earth. Human attack squadrons appeared from hidden positions throughout the outer system, striking at the edges of the alien formation before vanishing back into the darkness. The attacks were small but constant. Wearing down the enemy's shields and nerves, Admiral Kextor watched with growing frustration as his fleet came under harassment from the elusive human forces. "Where are they coming from?" he demanded. "Our sensors show nothing, then suddenly they are among us. The humans appear to be using the asteroid fields for cover," his tactical officer reported. "They strike and then hide among the rocks where our sensors cannot distinguish them from natural debris. Then blast the asteroids," Kextor ordered, "all of them. Deny them any place to hide." But the Zephyrian admiral quickly learned that destroying asteroids was easier said than done. The human fighters were incredibly mobile, moving from rock to rock faster than the heavy alien weapons could track them. For every asteroid the Zephyrians destroyed, 10 more provided cover for the ghostly human attackers. Captain Barnes led her squadron in a daring raid on a Zephyrian supply ship, her fighters darting between the massive escort vessels like angry wasps. Her plasma cannons found their mark, crippling the supply vessel's engines and forcing it to drop out of formation. "Scratch one supply ship," Barnes reported with satisfaction. Moving to secondary target. The harassment continued for 36 hours as the Zephyrian fleet fought its way through the outer system. By the time they reached the inner planets, Admiral Kextor had lost over 200 ships to the constant attacks. But worse than the losses was the effect on his crew's morale. The mighty Imperial Navy was being picked apart by invisible enemies, who struck without warning and vanished like ghosts. The main battle began when the alien fleet entered Earth's defensive perimeter. General Webb had positioned his forces in a layered defense that stretched from the asteroid belt to Earth's moon. Unlike the first battle, the humans now had time to prepare proper fortifications and defensive positions. "All units, this is General Webb," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Today we show these aliens what happens when you threaten the human race. Make every shot count." The Zephyrian fleet advanced in perfect formation, their massive ships gleaming like deadly jewels in the light of Earth's sun. But as they moved closer to the planet, they encountered defense systems unlike anything in their experience. Hidden among the asteroids were dozens of automated weapon platforms, each one built using captured Zephyrian technology and powered by human determination. The platforms opened fire with devastating effect, their weapons calibrated specifically to penetrate alien shields. "Impossible," Admiral Kextor muttered as he watched his tactical display light up with damage reports. How did they build such weapons so quickly? The answer lay in humanity's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and learn from their enemies. Every captured alien ship had been studied, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. The humans had taken Zephyrian technology and made it better, deadlier, and more efficient. Commander Paul Henderson led the rebuilt Earth defense fleet from the bridge of the new flagship Retribution. The ship was built using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology, making it faster and more maneuverable than any pure Zephyrian vessel. "All ships, break formation and engage," Henderson ordered. "Use the tactics we practiced. Make them fight our kind of war?" The human fleet scattered in all directions, abandoning the neat formations that the Zephyrians expected. Instead, they fought like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks while remaining impossible to pin down. Each human ship was in constant motion, striking at weak points in the alien formation before dancing away from return fire. But the most shocking surprise came when the Zephyrians realized they were not fighting humans alone. Ships of a dozen different species joined the battle, all flying under human command. The Kethar had contributed their knowledge of Zephyrian weak points. The Vashani had provided industrial support, building weapons and ammunition. The liberated worlds that the humans had freed now stood beside them in battle. Dr. Zenkaler, the Vashani scientist rescued by Colonel Murphy, had worked day and night to develop new weapons specifically designed to fight the Zephyrian Empire. His quantum disruptors could tear through alien shields like paper, giving the smaller human ships a fighting chance against their massive opponents. The shield frequency has been modulated, Dr. Zenkaller reported from his position in the Retributions. Engineering section. Our weapons will now penetrate their defenses with 70% greater efficiency. The battle raged across the entire solar system. From the asteroid belt to the orbit of Mars, space filled with the fire of countless weapons and the debris of destroyed ships. The Zephyrians fought with the desperation of an empire that had never known defeat, while the humans fought with the fury of a species defending its home. Captain Rodriguez's younger brother, Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez, piloted his fighter through the heart of the enemy formation. Carlos had joined the military after his brother's heroic death in the first battle, driven by a desire to honor his memory and protect his homeworld. "This is for Dan," Carlos whispered as he lined up his shot. On a Zephyrian cruiser, his plasma torpedoes struck the alien ship's reactor core, causing a chain reaction that destroyed 3 nearby vessels, but the Zephyrians were not defenseless. Their reality disruption weapons carved through human formations, destroying ships and killing thousands of defenders. The massive alien dreadnoughts seemed unstoppable, their thick armor absorbing tremendous punishment while their weapons devastated everything in their path. Admiral Kextor believed victory was still within his grasp when the third phase of the human defense began. Suddenly, his fleet found itself under attack from behind as Colonel Murphy's expeditionary force returned from Zephyrian space with a fleet of liberated ships and volunteer crews from a dozen species. "Admiral," Murphy announced over an open communication channel, "you should have stayed home." Murphy's force struck the rear of the Zephyrian formation just as the main human fleet launched a coordinated assault from the front. Caught between 2 forces and harassed by countless small attackers, the mighty Imperial Navy began to crumble. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Captain Garcia, flying a captured Zephyrian fighter, managed to penetrate the flagship's defenses and plant a quantum charge in its reactor core. The explosion that followed lit up half the solar system. 7 years had passed since the humans first rejected the Zephyrian ultimatum. 7 long years of war that had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, consuming entire star systems and reshaping the balance of power that had existed for 3,000 years. The once mighty Zephyrian Empire now controlled only a handful of core worlds, their vast fleets reduced to scattered remnants hiding in the dark spaces between stars. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human flagship Retribution. As it emerged from hyperspace above Nexus Prime, the crystal capital world of the dying empire, Morrison was no longer the young captain who had received that first alien transmission. War had aged him, turning his hair gray and carving deep lines around his eyes. But those eyes still burned with the same determination that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "Signal the fleet," Morrison ordered. "All ships maintain formation. We finish this today." Behind the Retribution stretched the largest liberation fleet in galactic history. Over 800 ships from 50 different species, all united under human command. The Cathar flew alongside their former oppressors turned allies. The Vashani had contributed their most advanced vessels. Even some Zephyrians, those who had chosen freedom over empire, served in the mixed crews that operated the captured warships. Commander Beth Taylor, Morrison's second in command, watched the tactical displays with quiet satisfaction. She had started the war as a junior officer on a patrol ship. Now she commanded the respect of admirals from across the galaxy. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface," Taylor reported. "It is Emperor Vexkul himself." Morrison nodded. "Put him through." The holographic image that appeared on the bridge showed a broken creature barely recognizable as the proud ruler who had once commanded the galaxy. Emperor Vexkul's crystal throne was cracked, his royal robes torn and dirty. Around him, the once magnificent throne room showed signs of decay and neglect. I request terms of surrender," the Emperor said, his voice barely above a whisper. Morrison studied the defeated alien leader for a long moment. "Unconditional surrender?" complete dismantling of all Imperial military forces, war crimes trials for all leadership personnel involved in genocide and slavery, full reparations to every world damaged by Imperial occupation. Vex School's scaled features twisted with despair. You would destroy us utterly? Leave nothing of our civilization? Your civilization was built on the bones of your victims, Morrison replied without emotion. What we are offering you is the same choice you gave to every other species in this galaxy. Evolve or perish. The Emperor's image flickered and died as he cut the transmission. Morrison turned to his crew. All ships, prepare for planetary assault. If they want to fight to the end, we will accommodate them. But the fight had already gone out of the Zephyrian Empire. 3 hours later, white flags appeared over every major city on Nexus Prime. The surrender was complete and unconditional. The formal ceremony took place in the same crystal chamber where the High Council had once planned their conquest of human space. Morrison walked through the halls that had once echoed with the arrogant voices of alien conquerors. Now filled only with the whispered fears of the defeated Elder Tanox was one of the few original council members still alive. The ancient Zephyrian approached Morrison with trembling steps, his once proud bearing replaced by the shuffle of someone who had seen his entire world destroyed. We should have listened, Tanox whispered. The precursors warned us. They said never to wake the sleeping giant. Dr. Lisa Chang, now Director of Xenological Affairs for the Human Government, stood beside Morrison as he accepted the Empire's surrender. The precursors created us to be guardians, she told the old alien. You forced us to become something else. What will you do with us? Tanox asked, his voice filled with fear. What you should have done with your victims, Chang replied. We will give you a chance to rebuild, to become better than what you were. The trials that followed lasted for 2 years. The galaxy watched as human justice, tempered by mercy, dealt with 3,000 years of imperial crimes. Some Zephyrian leaders faced execution for their role in genocides. Others received prison sentences proportional to their crimes. But many, especially the younger generation who had opposed the war, were offered the chance to help rebuild what their empire had destroyed. Captain Garcia, now a general in the Galactic Liberation Forces, oversaw the reconstruction efforts on dozens of former slave worlds. The work was enormous. Entire civilizations had to be rebuilt from scratch. Billions of beings needed food, shelter, and medical care. It will take generations to undo the damage, Garcia reported to the Galactic Council during one of their monthly meetings. But the progress is remarkable. Former slave worlds are beginning to flourish again. The Galactic Council itself was humanity's greatest achievement. Rather than establishing their own empire to replace the Zephyrian one the humans had created, something unprecedented, a democratic alliance where every species had an equal voice in governing their shared galaxy. President Elena Rodriguez addressed the council from the chamber built on the ruins of the old imperial palace. We did not fight this war to become conquerors, she said. We fought so that no being would ever again face the choice between slavery and extinction. Rodriguez had been elected on a platform of galactic reconstruction and reconciliation. She was a skilled diplomat who understood that winning the peace would be just as important as winning the war. Under her leadership, the human government had established relief programs, reconstruction funds, and educational exchanges designed to heal the wounds left by millennia of oppression. But not everyone was happy with humanity's approach to victory. Some human extremists argued that their species should rule the galaxy by right of conquest. They pointed to humanity's military superiority and claimed that other species could not be trusted to govern themselves. General Webb, now elderly but still sharp, addressed these concerns during a military review. We are not conquerors, he told his officers. We are liberators. The moment we forget that difference is the moment we become what we fought to destroy. The wisdom of humanity's approach became clear as former enemy worlds chose to join the Galactic Alliance voluntarily. Zephyrian core worlds, once they had experienced democratic government and economic freedom, voted overwhelmingly to remain part of the new order. Colonel Murphy, now Director of Galactic Security, worked with former enemies to establish peacekeeping forces on troubled worlds. His greatest success was the integration of reformed Zephyrian military units into the Alliance forces. They know the galaxy better than anyone, Murphy explained to critics who questioned the wisdom of arming former enemies. Who better to help us prevent another empire from rising? Dr. Zen Kaller, the Vashani scientist who had helped develop the weapons that defeated the Empire, now led the Galactic Research Council in developing peaceful technologies. His quantum energy systems brought clean power to worlds that had been strip-mined by their former oppressors. Science should serve life, not death, Zen Kaller said during the dedication of a new research station. We have seen what happens when knowledge is used only for destruction. But perhaps the most important change was in humanity itself. The species that had been created as weapons had chosen to become something more. They established universities throughout the galaxy, sharing their knowledge freely. They created art, music, and literature that celebrated not human superiority, but the diversity of all galactic civilization. Captain Barnes, now Admiral of the Galactic Patrol, led mixed crews on missions to explore the unknown regions beyond the former empire. They discovered new species, new worlds, and new possibilities for peaceful cooperation. Every world we find is a reminder of what we are protecting, Barnes said as her fleet made first contact with a previously unknown civilization. Not just human lives, but all life. As the years passed, memorials were built on every world to remember the victims of the Zephyrian Empire and the heroes who had died to free them. The largest memorial stood on Earth itself, in the place where President Hayes had first decided to reject the alien ultimatum. Morrison, now retired from active service, often visited the memorial wall where the names of the fallen were carved in stone. He would stop at the panel that bore the name of Captain Don Rodriguez, the pilot whose sacrifice had inspired a generation of heroes. "We kept our promise," Morrison would whisper to the silent names. "We made sure your deaths mattered." The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the price of tyranny and the value of freedom. But it had also learned something else, that even the most warlike species could choose peace when given the chance. Elder Tanox, now working as a teacher in a school for war orphans, often told his students about the old empire and the humans who had ended it. "They could have ruled us through fear," he would say. "Instead, they taught us to rule ourselves through wisdom." 50 years after the first battle at Earth, President Rodriguez's granddaughter stood before the Galactic Assembly to deliver the anniversary address. The chamber was filled with beings from 1,000 worlds, all free to speak, to vote, and to dream of a better future. "Our ancestors awakened something terrible when they threatened humanity,"